A wedding in a small village has just run out of wine. Nobody important is watching. No crowds, no fame yet. Just a quiet family embarrassment. And a mother who leans toward her grown son and says 6 simple words. They have no more wine. The man she turns to has never done anything remarkable. Not once in 30 years. He has healed no one, calmed no storm, raised no one from the dead. But in the next few minutes, water sitting in 6 stone jars will become the finest wine anyone at that feast has ever tasted. And it will be only the first of them. Because, over the next 3 years, this man will open blind eyes and unstop deaf ears. He will still a screaming storm with a sentence. He will walk across a lake as if it were a floor. He will feed thousands from a boy's lunch and call the dead out of their graves by name. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. And by long tradition, the church has counted around 37 of these recorded wonders. But here is the thing almost everyone misses about them. They are not magic tricks. They are not random bursts of power meant to impress a crowd. Every single one is a sign, a signpost, an arrow pointing past itself at one enormous question. Who is this man? So let's follow the arrows, all of them, and see where they point. Start with the word the Bible actually uses, because it changes everything. We call them miracles. The gospel writers rarely do. Matthew, Mark, and Luke often call them acts of power. In Greek, dunamis, the word buried inside our word dynamite. But John reaches for a different word almost every time. Semeion, a sign. A sign is not the destination. A sign is the thing on the road that tells you where the destination is. A miracle that only makes you say how amazing has failed as a sign. A miracle that makes you ask who could possibly do this has done its job. John is so committed to this that he ends his whole gospel by admitting it. Jesus did many other signs, he writes, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. So the wonders were never the point. They were the finger pointing at the point. And they fall into 4 great families: healings, power over nature, freeing the tormented, and raising the dead. We will take them one at a time. Begin with the largest family by far, the healings. More than any other kind, Jesus heals bodies. And he almost never does it the same way twice. A man covered in leprosy comes and kneels in the dust before him. In that world, leprosy was a living death. You were untouchable, exiled, cut off from everyone you loved. The man says, "Lord, if you will, you can make me clean." And Jesus does something no one else would dare. He reaches out his hand and touches him. He touches the untouchable, and he says, "I will. Be clean." Notice that. The healing was not the first gift he gave. The touch was. This was a man no one had laid a hand on in years, and before he was clean, he was held. In a house in Capernaum, 4 friends carry a paralyzed man to Jesus and cannot get through the crowd. So they climb onto the roof, tear it open, and lower their friend down to the ceiling on his mat. And Jesus, seeing their faith, says something startling, not, "Be healed." He says, "Son, your sins are forgiven." The room goes cold. Only God can forgive sins. Everyone in it knows that. So Jesus asks them, which is easier, to forgive sins, or to say, "Rise, take up your bed and walk"? Then, to prove he has the authority to do the first, he does the second. And the man walks home carrying his own mat. A woman has been bleeding for 12 years. 12 years of doctors, of shame, of being unclean. She has spent everything she had, and only grown worse. She thinks, if I can just touch the edge of his cloak, I will be healed. She reaches through the crowd, brushes the hem of his robe, and the bleeding stops instantly. Jesus stops too. "Who touched me?" he asks, and out of a jostling crowd of thousands he finds her. He does not scold her. He calls her daughter. "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." A Roman officer, a centurion, an enemy of Israel, comes to him about his dying servant. Jesus offers to come to his house, but the soldier says something that stops him. "Only say the word, and my servant will be healed. I too am a man under authority. I say go, and he goes." Jesus marvels. "With no one in Israel," he says, "have I found such faith." And the servant is healed in that same hour, from miles away, by a word. Then, the eyes. Again and again, Jesus opens blind eyes, and never once the same way. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus simply shouts for him until Jesus calls him over and gives him his sight. A man born blind is sent to wash in a pool called Siloam and comes back seeing for the first time in his life. One blind man near Bethsaida is healed in 2 stages. At first he says, "I see people, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus touches him again, and he sees everything clearly. A man who is deaf and can barely speak is brought to him. Jesus takes him aside, touches his ears and his tongue, looks up to heaven, and says one word, "Ephphatha," be opened. 10 lepers cry out to him from a distance, and all 10 are cleansed as they walk away. But only one comes back to say thank you, and he is a Samaritan, a foreigner. And on the night he is betrayed, when a disciple slices off a servant's ear with a sword, Jesus performs his very last healing. He touches the ear of a man in the mob come to arrest him and makes it whole. The second family is stranger. Here Jesus does not mend a body, he overrules nature itself. Which brings us back to that wedding at Cana. 6 stone jars stood there for washing, each one large enough to hold 20 or 30 gallons. "Fill them with water," Jesus says. And when the water is drawn back out, it has become wine, and the best wine of the night. John calls it the first of his signs, and says he manifested his glory. The maker of grapes and rain and sun and soil simply skipped the vineyard, and the seasons, and the years of waiting, and went straight to the wine. Early on, he tells a crew of fishermen who have caught nothing all night to let their nets down one more time. And the catch is so enormous, the nets begin to tear, and the boats begin to sink. Peter falls at his knees, terrified. One evening, out on the lake, a violent storm nearly swamps their boat, and Jesus is asleep in the stern. They wake him in a panic. He stands, and he speaks to the wind and the waves as if to a person. "Peace, be still." And instantly there is a dead calm. The disciples are more frightened after than before. "Who then is this," they whisper, "that even wind and sea obey him?" Another night, the disciples are rowing against the wind far from shore, and they see something impossible. A figure walking toward them across the open water. They think it is a ghost. It is Jesus. And Peter says, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come." And for a few astonishing steps, Peter walks on the water too. Then he looks at the wind, and fear pulls him under, and Jesus catches his hand. And the men in the boat worship him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Then comes the miracle so important that all 4 Gospels stop to record it. A crowd of 5,000 men, besides women and children, has followed him into a lonely place. Evening is coming, and there is no food. A boy has 5 small barley loaves and 2 fish. That is all there is. Jesus takes the bread, looks up to heaven, gives thanks, and breaks it. And it does not run out. 5,000 men eat until they are full. And the disciples gather 12 baskets of leftovers from a boy's lunch. Later he does it all again for a different crowd. 4,000 this time, from 7 loaves with 7 baskets to spare. Once, when the temple tax is due and there is no money to pay it, He tells Peter to go fishing. "Cast a hook," he says, "and in the mouth of the first fish you catch, you will find a coin. Take it and pay the tax." And it is there. And once, only once, the power runs the other way. Hungry, and finding a fig tree covered in leaves but bearing no fruit, he curses it, and by morning it has withered to the roots. It is his one destructive miracle. And it is a warning in the shape of a tree. A life that is all leaves and no fruit. Step back and look at this whole family of signs together. He turns water to wine and multiplies bread and fills empty nets. He is Lord over what we eat and drink. He silences the storm and walks upon the waves. He is Lord over the very chaos we fear most. And every one of these was something the Old Testament said only God could do. Only God treads on the waves of the sea. Only God stills the roaring of the waters. And here is a man in a fishing boat, doing it with a word. The third family makes modern readers uncomfortable. The Gospels do not. Again and again, Jesus confronts dark spirits tormenting real people, and with a single command, he sets them free. He never uses spells, or charms, or rituals. He speaks, and they obey, and they flee. The most dramatic case lives among the tombs, on the wrong side of the lake. A man lives there naked and screaming, so strong that no chain can hold him, cutting himself night and day. When Jesus asks his name, a whole chorus answers through him. "My name is Legion, for we are many." A legion was a Roman army unit of thousands. This is one man carrying an army of torment. The spirits beg not to be destroyed, and Jesus sends them into a herd of pigs, about 2,000 of them, that rush down the bank and drown in the lake. And the townspeople find the wild man sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. They are so afraid of the power that healed him that they beg Jesus to leave. Elsewhere, a man is brought who cannot speak, because a spirit has silenced him. Jesus casts it out, and the mute man speaks, and the crowds are amazed. A foreign woman begs him for her tormented daughter, and will not be turned away. And Jesus frees the girl from across a distance, without ever entering the house. A desperate father brings a boy seized by a spirit that throws him into fire and water, after the disciples have already tried and failed. Jesus rebukes the spirit, lifts the boy up by the hand, and gives him back to his father, whole. Why does this family of signs matter so much? Because Jesus does not treat evil as an idea to be discussed. He treats it as an enemy to be defeated, and it always loses. Every single time, without a struggle, at the sound of his voice. When his critics say he casts out demons by the prince of demons, he answers them with logic. "If I cast out demons by the finger of God," he says, "then the kingdom of God has come upon you." That is what every exorcism announces. A new king has arrived, and he is taking his world back. The occupation is ending, and it ends the moment he speaks. No ritual, no struggle, no long campaign. Just a word, and the darkness has to go. The fourth family is the smallest and the most staggering. 3 times the Gospels say Jesus raises the dead, and each one goes a step further than the last, as if the impossible is being slowly turned up. The first is a 12-year-old girl, the daughter of a synagogue leader named Jairus. Jairus falls at his feet and begs him to come, but on the way, word arrives. The girl is already dead. Do not trouble the teacher. Jesus turns to him and says, "Do not fear, only believe." He comes to a house full of weeping and says the girl is only sleeping, and they laugh at him. He takes her cold hand and says 2 words in his own language, "Talitha kumi," "Little girl, arise," and her spirit returns, and she gets up and walks. And then, tenderly, he tells them to give her something to eat. That was a girl who had only just died. The second raising goes further. At the gate of a town called Nain, Jesus meets a funeral coming out. A widow is burying her only son. She has already lost her husband. Now she has lost everything. Jesus sees her, and the gospel says it plainly. He had compassion on her, and he said, "Do not weep." Then he does something that should make him unclean. He walks up and touches the open bier, and the pallbearers stop. "Young man," he says, "I say to you, arise." And the dead man sits up and begins to speak, and Jesus gives him back to his mother. That was a young man on the day of his funeral. The third raising goes further still. His friend Lazarus falls sick in Bethany, and by the time Jesus arrives, Lazarus has been in the tomb 4 days. 4 days. In that world, that meant there was no hope left and no mistake possible. He was truly, finally dead. Martha, his sister, meets Jesus on the road in tears. And Jesus says the words that have hung over every grave since. "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live." He comes to the tomb, a cave with a stone laid across it, and he weeps. God himself, standing at a grave, in tears. "Take away the stone," he says. "Lord," Martha protests, "by now there will be an odor. He has been dead 4 days." They roll the stone back. Jesus prays, and then he calls out in a loud voice. 3 words. "Lazarus, come out." And a dead man walks out of his own tomb, still wrapped from head to foot in his grave clothes. Notice the pattern. A girl newly dead. A man on his funeral day. A friend 4 days in the tomb. Each time, death has a firmer grip, a little longer in its hold, and each time, it lets go the instant he commands it. Death itself is starting to look less like a wall and more like just another sickness he can heal. Which brings us at last to the sign behind all the signs. Because as astonishing as those 3 were, every one of them died again. Jairus' daughter grew old. Lazarus was buried a second time. Their raisings were previews. They were not the main event. All along, Jesus kept pointing past his miracles to one final sign he had not yet given. When his enemies demanded a sign to prove himself, he refused them every miracle but one. "No sign will be given," he said, "except the sign of Jonah." As Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. He said it another way, standing in the temple. "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." They thought he meant the building. He was speaking about his own body. From early on, he told his disciples plainly what was coming, and they could not bear to hear it. That he must go to Jerusalem and suffer and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised. And then it happened. Exactly as he had said. The man who healed the sick was arrested. The man who raised the dead was crucified. The hands that had opened blind eyes were nailed to a Roman cross. And he died. Really died. A spear was driven into his side to be sure of it. His body was sealed in a borrowed tomb behind a heavy stone. For his friends, every sign now seemed to mean nothing. Their teacher was dead, like anyone else. It was the darkest silence in the whole story. A Friday, and then a long, hopeless Saturday. And then, before dawn on the 1st day of the week, some women came to the tomb with spices to tend the body. But the stone was rolled away, and the tomb was empty, and the grave clothes were lying there, folded, undisturbed. This time, no one spoke a word over him. No one took his hand and said, "Arise." This time, the dead man raised himself. The one who had called Lazarus out of the grave walked out of his own. And he was no ghost. He ate breakfast with his friends on a beach. He let them touch the wounds in his hands. And this raising was different from all the others. He did not come back only to die again. He came back with a body that can never die. The first human being to pass all the way through death and out the other side. This is the sign that every other sign had been pointing at. When he healed a fever, it whispered this. When he stilled a storm, it hinted at this. When he called Lazarus out, it rehearsed this. All of them were arrows, and every arrow was aimed here, at an empty tomb on a Sunday morning. The wine at the wedding, the bread on the hillside, the girl, the widow's son, the friend 4 days dead. Every one of them was a small, bright promise of this, that in Jesus, death has finally met something stronger than itself. So step all the way back and ask again the question every miracle was built to raise. Who is this? Look at what these 4 families of signs actually claim when you lay them side by side. He heals every disease. He commands the wind and the sea. He gives orders to demons. He raises the dead, and he walks out of his own grave. In the Old Testament, there is only one who does all of those things, and he is not a man. That is the arrow. That is where every sign has been pointing all along. But do not miss the other thing the miracles reveal. Not just his power, his heart. He did not have to touch the leper. A word alone would have healed him. He touched him because the man had not been touched in years. He wept at a grave he was about to empty. He noticed one trembling woman in a crowd of thousands. Over and over, the Gospels give the same reason for what he did. Not to build a crowd, not to win an argument. He had compassion on them. So the miracles are not merely proofs. They are a window into what God is like when he comes near. And they are more even than that. They are a preview of a mended world. Every healing is a small picture of a day when there will be no more sickness. Every raising, a picture of a day when there will be no more death. When Jesus opened a blind eye, he was not breaking the rules of the world. He was showing us the world as it was always meant to be, and one day will be again. The kingdom of God, breaking in early. A crack of dawn light before the sunrise. That is what the miracles are. Not magic, not spectacle, signs. Every one of them an arrow pointing to a person and through him to a promise. A wedding that has run out of wine. A world that has run out of hope. And a maker who quietly steps in and begins to put it all right.